All right, this week on The Big Show, Michael Jackson's most popular and best-selling album, Thriller, turns 40. We'll discuss the lasting impact of this iconic project. Plus, Will Smith is back. His latest film, Emancipation, hits theaters, and this is his first project since Slapgate. Had to say it, it's true. We'll review Violent Night, which Tim did not go to, but I heard I missed some things. We'll have all that and more on episode 516 of Keeping It Real with FilmGordon. Let's get it. All right, and welcome to the latest episode of Keeping It Real with Tim Gordon. I am Tim Gordon. I am joined by Charles Kirkland Jr. I had to hit my hands. Charles Kirkland Jr. What's going on, boy?
What's going on, Tim Gordon? This is a happy Rosa Parks Day to you and to our other guests. And the show is called Keeping It Real with FilmGordon, not Keeping It Real with Tim Gordon. I just want to say that just so that people don't think they're in a different universe or something.
All right. And thank you for clearing that confusion up, Charles. We are also joined by CCA member, WAFCA member, all-around music dude who I'm going to talk to later on, who did not put me down on Simba. I had to find this dude on my own. It is Julian Lytle. Julian, what's up?
Hello from Echo Land.
Yeah, but I'm very serious about Simba, man. I was listening to this.
I haven't listened to Simba either, so
you don't listen to. Oh man,
I just know he got a Fire Funk Flex freestyle.
Bruh, and that's what made me listen to a bunch of. I fell into the Simba wormhole, so I was in there for about an hour just listening to all these different tracks. But get out of the Bay Area rapper. Pretty good flow. But we'll talk about that later on. So welcome to the show, Julian. We got a lot to talk about today. We were all at the screening for Emancipation earlier this week. I got to go on Travis's show tomorrow to talk about it. We're going to be talking about Emancipation for a minute. So that's coming up a little later on in the show, as well as Violent Night. I will start today's show off by, again, the GOAT. The greatest stand-up comedian of all time was born on this day in 1940 in Peoria, Illinois. My man, Richard Pryor. Why you putting your head? What did I do? Where's Julian?
Because Charles interrupted and said Dave Chappelle.
Wow. Well, again, man, that's why I said Charles fancies himself a comedian. So I'm gonna let Charles have that. But Richard Pryor's birthday is today, so it is not Dave Chappelle's birthday. Dave Chappelle, as great as he is, and the career that Dave Chappelle has, and as much as I love Dave Chappelle does not have Richard Pryor's impact in stand-up comedy. He just doesn't. You don't even have to take my word for it. Just Google #1 stand-up comedian of all time, and Richard Pryor's name comes up.
He might one day.
Huh?
He might one day.
He might one day.
Because he's not going to die early, probably.
Like, so watch this.
He got like
one day, but
30 years.
Ain't that day. Richard Pryor is still a GOAT. Now, Dave Chappelle is on the Mount Rushmore along with George Carlin, and then you can pick who the fourth dude is. But yeah, man,
I know it has to be those who can't be named.
Charles, that's the one that Charles really wants to put on there. The guy who has been banished.
You can't talk about him, but
on the comedic Mount Rushmore. But Pryor is the GOAT, man. I mean, that dude. He I know there might be younger people watching this. And you're just going to have to do some research, man. Richard Pryor, his story, his backstory is almost as fascinating as his comedy. You know, comes out the box in the 60s, fancies himself as, and Carlin was the same way. They both wanted to, well, I don't know if Carlin wanted to be Cosby, but Pryor, I know absolutely did. Carlin also was doing kind of like smart comedy, anti-counterculture stuff. And then he grew a beard and kind of went through a similar transformation that Pryor went through. So the 60s to the 70s, man, when these guys kind of emerged. But also, Charles, the thing about Pryor that you got to remember that's different for Chappelle and it's different from any other Black comedian is that Pryor created a persona that didn't even exist before he did it. There was never the crazy N who was doing comedy. I mean, think about it. It wasn't Red Fox. I'm not going to say the word, but I'm saying that was what he introduced in 1971 that had never been seen in comedy before, and it caught everybody off guard. And he was so good at it. He was a great storyteller. He had these amazing tales. Richard Pryor, bruh. I mean, I know Chappelle is great now, but Chappelle and Murphy and Rock and all these other guys that are popular now, where would you guys be without the foundation that was set with a Pryor, a Fox, and all these other comedians that came along? And I'm talking about Red Fox, not Jamie Foxx. So some of these guys, so Pryor, he's really influential and important in comedy. Not just black comedy, but comedy, period. Julian?
Yeah, I don't know if it's fair to even, I'm not to say that Eddie Murphy isn't great, but like in the current conversation, Eddie Murphy hasn't done stand-up comedy longer than he actually did stand-up comedy at this point. So it's like a weird untapped potential, because in a lot of ways, if going back to when he really blew up, he was like being pushed and pulled between the
comedy and film.
The two stalwarts of black comedy time, Bill Cosby and Richard Pryor, who had their own issues between each other and both influencing him. So it's just like, Eddie Murphy is just an interesting thing, because I actually think if he wanted to stay doing stand-up comedy, he probably would have been the greatest of all time. But I think he just decided, like, I'm going to go do other, like,
but wait a minute.
He had the opportunity to do other things.
But Julian, here's another part, and Charles and I have talked about this ad nauseum, right? Because we always talk comedy. The thing with Murphy, to me, which not necessarily disqualifies him, but limits him in my eye, is that if I'm talking about comedy, it's not just about the ability to make me laugh, but it's also about storytelling. It's about the breadth and depth of things that you talk about, right? So I get on Kevin Hart a lot about this, because Kevin Hart's act is essentially two things all the time. It's either he's talking about his family or he's talking about how short he was. And sometimes he intersperses both of those, but he's not really talking about a lot. Chris Rock is talking about some stuff. Chappelle talks about stuff. D.L. Hughley, a lot of these guys have content. They're talking about stuff. Even Cat Williams is addressing and talking about stuff in ways that, you know, a comedian who's kind of limited. Eddie does voices, and he's able to create these skits.
But
me, right? It's all subjective.
You're subtracting his ability to write sketch, his ability to write screenplays. So when you talk about comedy as an entire art, he can do things that I think some of these people you even named can't do well. Like, he was able to effortlessly do sketch to a point where there was an entire episode of SNL that was just the Eddie Murphy show for like an hour and a half. And it's like,
let me make sure we take the elephant out the room, right? Pryor, although he was uncredited, he got paid to do it. He wrote him and Mel Brooks wrote Blazing Saddles, with more Pryor writing Blazing Saddles.
Oh yeah,
Mel Brooks, right?
I understand. Yeah,
Pryor,
but I was also saying the other people you stated.
Oh well, the other people. I'm back on the man whose birthday is today, who was in Lady Sings the Blues, The Mac, Blue Collar, Which Way Is Up. I mean, Richard Pryor had an amazing run in the 70s of making a lot of great films while he was doing stand-up at the same time.
I understand.
So again, but to your point, there are a lot of people I listed. Chappelle's only screenplay was half-baked.
Classic though. It's a classic though.
I'm not a stoner and I don't get high, but I laugh at it.
You don't have to do no type of drug to understand that your man is soft and he got locked up and we need to get money to get him out of jail. You do not need to know. You just got to understand. Simple. And he wants to get with this beautiful girl. At the same time, they got to get their man out of jail.
I got you.
But also his sketch show.
His sketch show is
the Chappelle show is a sketch show. It's so important that it birthed other sketch shows. Like the fact that people can still watch these jokes are now 20 years old, some of them. And it's just like, nah, these jokes just came out. Like it's Chappelle is interesting. But it's, there's always gonna be new people breaking ground, and just like, Richard Pryor, I grew up at the point where, the parents say he was the GOAT, or his only other competitor was, the guy with the TV show that showed America that Black people can actually have money and have a family life. And that we also like to go to college. But for a young person, when I was in my teens, for me, I always thought that Richard Pryor and George Carlin was like the two actual best and the two contemporaries that like actually push things forward. And to a lot of ways, I don't think actually Carlin doesn't get enough credit in terms of what he was doing, because some of that stuff is just as smart. But the only thing that makes me sad is that I think if Pryor didn't get sick and he didn't pass away early, he could have still been banging out like old. We never really got to get old Richard Pryor. Like we never got to hear his thoughts on the world in the '90s or the 2000s. Like he would have jokes.
Man, before Richard Pryor turned 40, he set himself on fire.
So, yeah.
I mean, he was young. Richard Pryor was like 30. Well, actually, he might have been 40. He's like 39, 40 when all that stuff went down. And you're right. We never got that. Plus, the next decade, he develops, what was it?
MS.
MS. And yeah, we were robbed, man, of a jewel. But Carlin, who up until maybe early 15, 20 years ago, you were all diseased. You remember that one, Charles?
Yeah.
Oh my God, man. That guy had me on the floor crying watching Carlin. I love George Carlin. I really do. That's why him and Pryor always to me are like 1A and 1B. And but that's interesting, man. That's a good conversation to have. But Richard Pryor, I think, passed away. I want to say it was either 05 or 06. So he's been gone now, man, for about 15 years. But his impact is still the same, man. Even with him not being around, he's always discussed as the greatest whoever did that art form. And the most impactful whoever did that art form, man.
That's because you always bring him up.
I do. I got the box set. I got all his material. And plus, man, I got memories as a kid, man, where my father would wake me up in the middle of the night, man, when HBO would be playing his concerts, and we would watch him and sit there and laugh, man. Don't tell your mama. We're going to watch this, though. It's funny. So going from one childhood memory to the next, I'm just going to pivot real quick. November the 30th, which happened earlier this week, man, was the 40th anniversary release of Thriller, right? And I always love to tell this story, man. And I think I've told it on this show a couple of times, but it bears repeating again. When I was 18 years old, man, and I want to say in 82, I was in the Marine Corps stationed in Japan, right? I was about to come back stateside in several months. And this new album by Michael Jackson dropped, man. And I remember that thing immediately went to #1 in Japan. It was like super hot. I was like, oh, this is hot. And I got transferred back stateside, and I came back to California. And from 1983 to 1985, when I left, Thriller was the #1 album on the. I was like, and I remember at one point in 1984, Prince had come out. Prince made history. He's the first dude to ever have a #1 album because he kicked Michael out the charts for a week, for a couple of weeks. Purple Rain's #1. The song is #1. The movie ends up #1. And then Michael Jackson comes back. And I remember the joke. I used to be at the clubs, Julian, out in LA. And they had this one spot where they had like a dance floor. They had monitors all around the dance floor. And Michael Jackson was so big during this period that you'd be dancing on the floor to beat it. And you look up and Billie Jean was on the monitor. I was like, I said, when is this album ever getting off the charts, right? So I leave California in 1985. I come to DC. Guess what the #1 album in DC was? Friggin' Thriller in 1985. I'm like, wow. So when people today talk about a Beyonce, a Jay-Z, a Rihanna, this artist, that artist, you pick one, name it Drake, like whoever people think is huge. Julian, listen to me and listen to me carefully. Nobody in the modern era ever had a run like the 3-year run that Michael Jackson had from 1982 to 85, when there were no streaming services. You just had videos that were introduced. You had album sales. The man sold 30, and I think during that time period, it was like 30, 32, 33, 35 million albums.
Wait, remember the album first came out before SoundScan. So I remember because Quincy Jones said this. When SoundScan was implemented, they just said, we're going to approximate the Thriller has sold 40 million, and they counted up from that.
Right.
So technically,
well, I mean, but
if you think about, but just technically with going by the numbers, if they just said it was 40, it was probably more than that, because then if you count in bootleg pressings of the album, you know, because now they say it sold like 77 million, right? And you know, they always put that with like the Eagles' greatest hits is the best one. I'm like, first of all, wasn't nobody bootlegging the Eagles' greatest hits. So in my head,
well, there might have been some bootlegging, but not
the greatest hits. Not the greatest hits. Like it's good, but it's like, you know, to me, I bet Thriller sold, I bet you 130 million copies. I think there was a point in time where one out of every 5 person on this planet probably had Thriller.
Well, let me tell you a radio story I heard about Thriller, man. This was during the time, because royalties are normally paid like twice a year, right? And I had a buddy of mine who used to host the show on HUR, and he tells me the story that he knew Marcus Miller real well. And he said Marcus Miller went with somebody who went to pick up Michael Jackson's royalty checks. And he said they took a box. Now think about this, Julian, a box. They filled up a box with royalty checks just this 1 6-month period during the Thriller run. Michael Jackson also had he was also an amazing businessman that people don't talk about, because at that point, you remember, Julian, the famous story that Michael Jackson had negotiated a deal where they were paying him, I want to say it was over $1 an album doing the Thriller piece. And this is like in 1982, because after he done Rock With You, he re-upped his deal. And so imagine if you're talking about SoundScan where they're saying, you know, at bare minimum, he sold 40 million albums and not more. So that's just $40 million in royalties. That's not counting ticket sales. That's not talking about merchandise. Man, that dude, bruh, Michael Jackson. I mean, Julie, I don't know if you were really, how old were you doing 82 to 85? How old were you doing that run?
I was 2 to 5 years old.
Okay, so
but at a point where it's just like Michael Jackson was just, it was just all the time. Like I didn't know Thriller came out in 1982 till I was like a 25-year-old person. I was like, I thought it came out 85, but it's just like, because it's the concept. You don't think like, because even there's a point where like albums don't last like that anymore. It's inconceivable to think that an album can come out and blow up. Because, you know, you hear stories about albums that will come out and they will slowly build up.
Right.
Like a hit. But no, like it came out as a hit and it stayed being a hit literally from when I was a baby until being a kindergartner. And like when Bad came out, I didn't know that like Michael Jackson was away a long time. Like, cause the videos were still on. Like Motown 25 is still playing on TV. Like it's not like a big thing. Like he's around. Like, oh, he disappeared. I know he light skinned now, but I didn't know he was gone a long time because they played
light skinned now. Wow.
Like Thriller's just something from Thriller was always on. You know, DC area, PGC before they play rap music was still playing all the joints. Like all the hits were still in rotation. Like except for maybe Lady in My Life was the only joint they ain't really playing heavy. But they would put that on in the Quiet Storm time period.
Yeah.
Like, but everything else is like, oh yeah, this is Thriller. Him laying down. You know what I'm saying? Like,
we all said
he had his own Disney ride. He counted EO. That's how strong that joint was.
Charles?
Well, Michael was such a great businessman because I remember in 1982 I was in Detroit, Michigan, watching the Victory Tour, and Michael after he had done the last album, he's dropping stuff in the summer of 1982. He's dropping all this new stuff with his brothers, and I'm like, this is incredible. And I heard Thriller before the album actually dropped, which happened in November. So I was up there in July. He had already primed up the pump because people were demanding this music. I knew the words to Thriller before lots of people did because I've already got the concert. So if you went to the Victory Tour, he was already letting you know about this music. So when it dropped, everybody was already hot for it. So yeah, 1982 November, the album finally drops. People had heard the music already, and so it's like, yeah, okay, we're down with Michael Jackson because we've heard all the off the wall and the Victory Tour. He's just fire, and I remember going to the haunted house in November, and I'm rapping the Vincent Price part of Thriller, and people are like, what is that? Where'd you get that from? They thought I was dope because I knew the lyrics. I'm like, this is Michael Jackson's new song. Y'all got to get up with this. And I had mad props just because I had already been to the tour to catch all this stuff. So Michael Jackson was an incredible businessman. Hustling, he was hustling that album before that dropped in November. So yeah, it's a masterwork. I mean, like I said, every song is a killer on that album. Everyone.
And that's got two things. I got two things, right? Because Charles raises a good point, right? So I'll get to the second one in a second, but the first one, to Charles's point, in 1979, the legend goes, Michael Jackson was looking for somebody to produce this album, right? And he called Quincy Jones, and he was like, Q, I got this album I'm working on. You know anybody that can produce it? And Q was like, absolutely. So Michael was waiting. He was like, no, me. I'm good. I got you, right? So they do Rock With You, Off the Wall. Off the Wall sells 8 million albums. Michael Jackson thinks that this is a huge album, and the white press is not really giving him the burn that he wants, right? So all you done is put a battery in Michael's back. He's like, oh, that's what we doing? Okay. You wait till the next project comes out. And to Charles's point, he wanted every song. They went through over 100 songs, man, looking for all of the songs that went on Thriller. And the last song that made the album, which is actually one of my favorites, was Human Nature. They called up the kid from Toto. Quincy Jones was listening to a cassette tape. And it was the last song on the second side. Now, I don't know if Julie remembers this, but there was a time you would put a tape in a player and it would play all the way through, and then it would reverse and play.
He acted like I'm 42 years old. He's talking to me like I'm 28. Like okay. There's a reason why Raekwon's album is called The Purple Tape. It's not called anything else.
But I'm saying this was new technology back during that time period. And I remember hearing a story where Q heard that was the last song on the tape, gave it to Michael. Michael was like, I like that. Now, you also know, if you go online and Google Thriller, there's a bunch of songs that were recorded for the album that never made the album and never made any Michael Jackson album. I know it's at least 3. Am I correct?
At least 3. Yeah.
That he recorded that didn't make the album. And the second part that I wanted to introduce, which a lot of people sort of overlook, and Julian, this is for you, right? As a person that works in the music space, people talk about how dominant Jackson was during that 3-year period. Let's not forget that Prince had emerged. He had come out and as a solo artist in like 79. He dropped 1999 and 82, which was a huge record that could knock Michael Jackson off the charts. Bruce Springsteen had Born in the USA. He was hot as fish grease. he knocked Michael off for about a week or two, and then Michael was back. And then last but not least, Madonna and Lionel Richie. So it wasn't like there was nobody else doing anything. It was all Michael Jackson. There were guys that were out there, but none of their albums could touch what Thriller was doing. As great as Born in the USA, 1999, Purple Rain, Material Girl. I don't even remember Lionel Richie's album, The Dancing in the Ceiling.
Dancing on the Ceiling, I think.
Was that the name of the album?
Yeah.
So a lot of records.
Julian, think about that today. That if you pick the hottest artist, so I use Beyonce a lot because Beyonce's fans are like tenacious.
No disrespect to Beyonce.
But I'm just saying,
he sells a lot.
Beyonce,
you have to pick Drake. He's the one that actually sells the most records.
Okay, so let's say Drake.
And Taylor Swift and Adele, those are the three.
Okay, so imagine you pick any one artist, right? And then you had all of these artists who would knock them off the chart and they would be able to reemerge. Is that even possible today, Julian? The way the music business is.
His name is Aubrey Drake Graham, to be quite honest. Like, his numbers is crazy.
Okay.
Like, it's a certain point where, like, after 10 years, you kind of got to, like, shrug. It's just like, oh, he kind of, like, solved. And then you just look at the numbers and just like, oh, if people actually bought music, yo, he would probably have been sold like 50 million records, right?
I mean,
that's just weird about it.
I mean, like, don't forget. I mean, you talk about Drake, but you did mention Taylor Swift, who just landed all top 10 spots on the chart. It'd be the first person to ever do it. So I mean,
and she sold records because people went out to Target and bought the vinyl, the CD. Which is some people don't do because the album came out physical first, then streamed, and she had 4 covers to her vinyl, and these people was buying 4 copies to get every color like it's a comic book. I was
it's marketing genius, and that's what I'm talking about with Michael. I mean, back in the day, he was a marketing genius as well as a musical talent. So I mean, I'm not down to Taylor Swift for being smart about how to do it. I mean, that's just the way the business is.
And I don't want people who listen to this or might watch this to think I'm downplaying Beyonce. I do think that there's certain institutional structures that actually have held her down for years.
Oh yeah.
In terms of what she should be, where she should be played, how she should be counted, and the type of promotion she should get. You know, in terms of a person that purposely picked up the baton from Michael and his sister to be at a certain level of execution and making songs and performance. Like, she's it. But there's certain times you look at the numbers and it's just like, she deserves better. Like, the music, like, I tried to listen to Midnights from Taylor Swift. She ain't been popping for me since 1989. So, like, but she go crazy. Adele, as more and more boring as Adele gets, honestly, the more she sells you.
So let me add another piece in that I think that we don't talk enough about, right? So you talk about Aubrey, talk about Drake and his record sales, and you talk about Beyonce and what the industry has done for her. I know we talked about it earlier when Charles brought up Motown 25, but that cannot be understated of what that did for Michael Jackson, for a show that was that watched, and that, like, people can remember Motown 25 today. If you ask them, if this was a Family Feud question, what's the most memorable moment from Motown 25? It would be Michael Jackson moonwalking. Yeah. Really kind of like it. Oh, snap.
What happened? You all right?
Oh, I was talking and all of a sudden my screen went blank. But never mind, my apologies. The whole piece with Michael Jackson, when he did that, Julian, I remember at the time, and his album was already white hot by then, right? And all that did was make everybody run out. Oh my God, I got to get this Billie Jean song. And I just remember that I don't ever remember another period of any artist in my lifetime, and I'm almost 60, that I've never experienced that phenomenon that Michael Jackson introduced in 1982. I've never seen it.
The whole reason people watch Motown 25 was because he did that same thing on stage on the Victory Tour. So people were like, I'm going to check it out because he's going to do it. And so, yeah, for the people who hadn't seen it before, this was phenomenal. But there was a lot of people who said, oh, I know it's getting ready to happen. I know it's about to pop off, and I've seen it. So, yeah, Motown 25 will always be remembered for him debuting the moonwalk on television, which is another medium that he conquered, because I don't know, I have yet to see any other television station dedicate an hour to the debut of a video like they did for Michael Jackson when he started dropping videos on Fox, and they were taking time for him to show the video. That never happens. It still doesn't happen anywhere else, not on any major network station. No. As much as NFL put Fox on the map, Michael Jackson put Fox on the map too when he was debuting his videos on their network.
Yeah, well, let me tell you, bro. I'm one of the guys that dropped $5 in 1984. I was in Westwood. I was in LA. I went to a movie theater, and we dropped $5 and there was a line around the block to see Thriller in the movies. I saw Thriller as a movie before I saw it on television as a video. But I'm telling you, bro, the impact of what that guy was able to do, like now when we talk about the foundation, because, you know, Julian and I spent a lot of time talking about hip hop, right? And you can't talk about hip hop without talking about the pioneers, the legends who created it, the Kool Hercs, African Bambaataa, Grandmaster Flash, and then I'd also add Grandmaster Caz and some of those folks, Kool Moe Dee, the foundations of the game, right? When you talk about the foundations of the music industry, bro, there is, as great as Stevie Wonder is, and Stevie Wonder, as you all know, is my favorite artist, man, but Michael Jackson did some stuff that's way over what Stevie did, right? Stevie is a master, classic albums, but bro, Thriller, and watch this, I'm not the biggest Bad fan, right? But Off the Wall and Thriller, bruh, that's got to be one of the best 1-2 punches. And I'm not talking about Stevie Wonder. I'm talking about from a pop standpoint. Julian, I mean, I go to Julian on stuff like this, Charles, because Julian and I talk music all the time. And it looked like he's trying to Google something right now. What you Googling, Julian?
Yeah, I remember a couple years ago, I heard the reference track from Stevie Wonder did for Michael Jackson, some of the songs on Off the Wall and some on Thriller, like the big homie Stevie came through to let me hit you with some of these melodies. That's what I like, because you can clearly see that Stevie Wonder's run, Michael as a teen, seeing Stevie older, become an adult, take his autonomy, work with Berry Gordy, and then do those crazy run of albums with that amount of freedom. You can see how that influenced him, because you hear the stories that he just used to hang out with Stevie Wins in the studio, make it talking book or whatever. And then
singing background on some of those albums. I mean, so Michael was always around. He was soaking it up.
So you get to this point where, he thought he should have had album of the, he should at least been nominated for album of the year. This is the year of the Grammys. It is, I'm just gonna make something the most undeniable modern recorded album of all time. And then you have to, ain't nobody really touching that number. It's crazy thinking about, but every song on the album is a hit. Every song is a single. That's, personally, I couldn't watch Thriller, the video, until I was 21 years old because it frightened me, and I still don't really watch it that often. Because Landis is,
Charles. I mean, that's real.
Landis is use of special effects with Rick, was it Rick Berman? Whatever. Yeah, all that stuff with the
makeup and all that stuff.
I'm good. I'm not good with the transformation sequence. But yeah, Michael was all about that. But
it's the same transformation from American Werewolf in London, and when
that's the most frightening film of all time. I've never finished that film. That film is the most frightening thing I've ever seen in my life. Yeah, I heard all the stories. I like the fact that it gets to a point now that you take it as just It just is. But like Michael Jackson broke the color barrier for MTV, because the person who's in charge of the label had to basically get on. Is like, if you don't play Michael, our most successful artist, our most highest selling artist, we'll just like take all our songs off of MTV. And at that point, it made it even grow even bigger because like I remember as a kid seeing Michael Jackson with the amazing sunglasses on and his processed hair and the outfit with the military gear and him walking down with like an army behind him. Like I was like, how has he got it? Like you can't see that scene. This is why like my era is different because as a child, you seeing black people run down with an army behind them, walking up to Ronald Reagan. You know what I'm saying? They equal standard. Like Ronald Reagan ain't got the army behind him. Michael Jackson do. See, you know what I'm saying? I don't need Black Panther. I have Michael Jackson. You know what I'm saying? Like that was an amazing period of time. And the album, like it's too perfectly crafted. Like to me, it's the best pop album I ever recorded. You can't I don't think you can make anything better than it. Like, I don't care what kind of child or young person try to say, like, again, like whoever you pull up, like they're not touching them. Was it 9 songs? It's like 9 songs.
I'm looking it up.
It's an LP.
And it was
you don't need two LPs. It's one LP. Backward.
He had 9 songs on the album, and it had 7 singles. 7 singles. Thriller, but people just PYT, Human Nature, Wanna Be Starting Something, Beat It, Billie Jean and the Girl Is Mine. All 7 of those songs was slamming hits. All 7 of them. And the rest was still played on the radio as singles.
Yeah. Right.
So it's just they were
Lady in My Life was one, and I'm trying to think of what the other one was. It might have been one song on the album that didn't really. Baby Is My. Yeah, Baby Be Mine, and Baby Be Mine got played. Baby Mine. That's Baby Be Mine and the what was the other one?
Lady in My
Life. Those are the 2 songs. That album was 42 minutes long, man. Think about that for a second. That entire album was less than 45 minutes long.
Fire though.
Oh yeah, bro. Rod Temperton, who a lot of people don't know, wrote a lot of those songs with Michael Jackson.
Genius.
Was from Heatwave. He was the guy, Always and Forever, all of those hot Heatwave albums. Quincy Jones heard that, snatched him, brought him in, bruh. The rest they say is history.
I think at that point, to me, it's like Thriller is the reason why you gotta say that like Quincy Jones is the greatest producer of all time.
He wrote Thriller, bro. He wrote Thriller and The Lady in My Life.
Who are you talking about? Temperton?
Yeah,
Rod Temperton.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, and Baby Be Mine. Damn.
And there's a story where they were bringing Vincent Price in to record the beginning of that intro to Thriller, and Temperton was given a day to write that. I mean, in less than a day to write that for Vincent Price, and he cold did it and brought it in, and it was magic. It was magic. So Temperton is a beast.
Bruh, yeah, man. We could spend a whole hour talking about this album and the impact of this album, but to your point, man, I think Michael Jackson is kind of, to me, when we talk about BC, I mean, yeah, BC 8, after he, Stevie Wonder is, I think, the last line. Like the 1970s was all Stevie Wonder, bro. That cat dominated the 70s, and Michael Jackson came along and dropped Off the Wall in 79, and then the 80s on, that was all Michael Jackson. So, Prince is all that, that Michael Jackson era.
Don't leave out his little sister. Okay, you can't fake.
Well, his little sister came along and dominated the 90s.
That was
but that Control album.
We had another Jackson run.
Yeah. That Control album, though. That was like the perfect time.
86? Yeah.
Yeah, it was that perfect time when her brother didn't have anything out. Like, she said right in there. And you like, oh wow. Like,
it was a coincidence. I think it was a coincidence. Jackson was not going to let them slug it out like that. He was like, "Oh, okay, we're going to pause and let that happen." But it wasn't going to be no competition between his children like that. No, son.
Well, that's why to this day, Scream is such a great song for me. I love the video for Scream because it's the one time you see Michael Jackson, Janet Jackson, equal footing, doing their thing, man. I love and what was it? $7 million video, bro. Scream again. But yeah, man. We need to pivot, man. But what last question before we get out of here? And I'll start with you, Charles. What's the impact? And we've talked about how Jackson sort of kind of birthed, because he came along just at the right time of the music video period. And I think that was another thing that Jackson added with his creativity and was able to really not just help himself, but literally help the industry by showing them, giving them the blueprint. This is how you do this with these videos. So what is Michael Jackson's Thriller's impact today? Here we are now 40 years later.
Thriller is now and always will be the benchmark of achievement for what a musical artist can be and what he can do with, one album. You get multiple albums some people make in 3 years to try to come close to what he did with one album. It's just the GOAT. Thriller is the GOAT album of all time.
All right, and Julian?
Yeah, I guess in regards to pop music, I don't think you'll ever be able to top it. Its effects is still reverberating. People are still trying to capture certain things off it and make things in that mold. It's one of the best albums ever recorded, and even though they try to stamp him down with certain things, it moves its way back up because it's too amazing. Like, it's too amazing. It's incomprehensible how good the album is. Like, it's crazy. Like, it's absurd.
And you know what, man? I will echo Julian, and I will also add the caveat, which is really important. I was never the biggest Michael Jackson fan, man. I love Prince. So I respected Michael Jackson and loved his music, but I really felt Prince. Prince was kind of my guy. So for me to give it up to Michael Jackson, like, yo, man, it's undeniable, bro. What you've done, unprecedented. I don't think we'll ever see it again. And it kind of reminds me of the argument, as an aside, when we talk about Nas and Jay-Z. Jay-Z got bangers. It's true. Julian knows how
Don't you dare put Illmatic nowhere near Thriller. Don't you.
Bro, I'm just saying, I respect
Jay-Z. No, I understand what you're saying.
He has amazing music, but I'm a Nas guy.
I get it. I understand.
That's all I'm saying. I wasn't comparing any album that Jay-Z has done, any album that Nas was doing. I'm just talking about as artists like Magic Johnson, Larry Bird. You pick any two people that people argue about in barbershops, but it was Michael Jackson people and were Prince people. And even though I was a Prince person, I was like, what Michael Jackson is doing is crazy right now, bro. I respect it big time and have respected it more as time has gone by. So, all right, guys, it's time. We got about 20 minutes left, man. Or actually less than that now. And it's time for us to talk 2 movies this week. We're going to lead off with Violent Night, because I know both of you guys saw this movie.
Can I ask a question real quick before we get off of this topic? What's your number 1 song off the Thriller album?
Oh, I told you I love Human Nature, man. That's my jam, because I like that jam because as a 21-year-old kid coming home from the club, it would be the one song that I would play in the landscape 2-3 o'clock in the morning. It was just my jam, Loved Human Nature, man. What about you, Julian?
That's too hard of a question. I can't answer that question. It's too hard.
Come on, Julian. Just pick one, man.
Nah, it's too hard. Y'all playing.
What's your favorite song, Charles?
Believe it or not, I'm a big fan of The Lady in My Life. Because it reminds me of She's Out of where Michael breaks down and cries in the song. So I'm like, The Lady in My Life was kind of like my jam. I respected all the dance stuff, but this was like Human Nature was just like the chill out song. And I was like, yeah, this is for me.
There you go. And Julian, what's your favorite song, man? Because you ain't getting off of this, man. You got to pick one. You see, Human Nature, The Lady in My Life.
The whole album. You can't pick no song.
Oh my
God, crazy.
Julian,
you just let that joint play. What's wrong with y'all?
All right, if y'all watching at home, you can write us to have Julian give us his number one song off.
I was gonna say track one, hit play, and then when it finishes, there you go. That's the number one song. That's the whole thing. The whole thing.
See, that's where we know he's real, the new school, because we got to flip that joint over when we was listening to it.
Pretty much.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
all
wait.
Right, man. Here you go, man. An elite team of mercenaries break into a family compound on Christmas Eve, taking everyone hostage inside. However, they are prepared for the surprise combatant, Santa Claus, who is on the ground, and he's about to show why this Nick is no saint. David Harbour, John Leguizamo, Alex Hassel, Alexis Louder, Cam Gigadet, Beverly D'Angelo, and others star in Violent Night. And I will start with Charles Kirkland. Charles called me from the car on the way home. He was so excited about Violent Night, man. So talk to me. Give me a rundown on Violent Night, man.
Okay, so you think about this. Put together Die Hard with Home Alone, throw in some John Wick, and this is what you have as a movie. This was it. I said it's an instant classic. I mean, it's just, and Violent Night is the perfect description because it's over the top violent. It's gritty as I don't know what. I mean, I can't say the word, but man, from the moment this film starts, you can even put it in the little Bad Santa, because I mean there's a little bit of that at the very beginning, but man, this movie grabs you and shakes you and it tickles you and slaps you, and I just had a ball with this film. I'm sitting beside Julian and we're just busting out.
I'm losing it.
I mean, I'm not the kind of person that usually talks to the screen when I'm watching a film, but there's no way you could be silent in this joint. This joint was fire from the start. I recommend it. Like I said, I got off the phone with you when I got out. I got off the phone with a bunch of people when I got out. I was like, y'all got to see this movie. This movie is fire. It's an instant classic. One of the best things I've seen this year.
All right, damn. All right, Julian.
Yeah, I was the most terriblest audience member of our screening, because I damn sure said it's a classic like 10 times, like out loud, like not even playing no games. Like what Charles has said is literally, like, to me, it's Die Hard plus Santa Claus is Coming to Town, the little animated joint, and Home Alone with a touch of a Christmas Carol, with all the action you want from John Wick and like The Northman. Like the right amount of gross out humor, good use of cursing, mad bodies, and like the fades are excellently executed. The fades, Santa's just passing out fades. John Leguizamo, as his character's only name is Mr. Scrooge, and he's the perfect mix of like the Scrooge type character and like the Grinch, like. And Santa's just trying to get, he's just trying to deliver these presents, man. He just, you know what I'm saying? He has a perfect setup where like he's kind of like everybody's just too shallow or too consumerist, and then like there's one little girl that believe, he gotta save him for the little girl. And man, cutest kid of all 2022.
Yes.
Okay.
The fades though. The things that are given. Oh, Lord. Oh, my goodness. Classic. Needed on Ultra 4K Blu-ray.
You keep saying, oh, my goodness, and with the auto-tune, man, you sound like T-Pain, like, oh.
Look, if this Santa Claus, somebody was saying, this Santa Claus got to be the next Mortal Kombat video that comes, I mean, he wrecks stuff in this, and he's been alive for 1,100 years. I mean, he's been married to Mrs. Claus for 1,100 years, but we get to see who Santa was before he became Santa, and that's what really sets it all off, man. It's beautiful to watch. Beautiful.
Both of you guys are just gushing over the movie, man. I kind of know where this is going.
You have no idea.
What did you grade?
I'm giving it an A. My review has an A on it. It's giving it an A.
Charles Kirkland?
A.
Wow. All right, cool. So so people should go out with the expectation that Silent Night is Violent Night. I'm calling it Silent Night. Violent Night. It's in the title. It sounds like a bit like Nobody. Is it kind of like that kind of violence?
Yeah, John Wick style. Yeah, John Wick style.
Okay.
Yeah.
You can't bring no little kids to this, but like if they 15 and up, everybody can go.
All right.
You'll enjoy themselves.
So we got Violent Night. So that's 1AA across the board. And our next movie is Emancipation. Julian's already got his head in his hands. This is gonna be interesting. This is the historical action film directed by Antoine Fuqua, brother I happen to like a lot, and written by William N. Collage, and based on the true story of Gordon, who they named Peter in the film, a former slave, and photographs of his bare back, heavily scourged from an overseer's whipping, which formed the tree, that famous photo, that were published worldwide in 1863, giving the abolitionist movement proof of the cruelty of American slavery. The film, of course, stars Will Smith, Ben Foster, who I like a lot as an actor, and from The Good Fight, Charmaine Bigwa as his wife. I will go first on this one. I called both Julian and Charles before we had the screening, and I was like, bruh, another Black trauma movie, man. I'm assuming, without having seen the film, I'm like, okay, we're going to have to see what happened to his back. And I think Antoine Fuqua, who I always talk about in this show, is kind of a testosterone-driven action director. And I thought it was a weird choice that he'd be making a film set during the era of slavery, right? And what we come to find out is that how I describe it is he made an action adventure film that sort of I thought I was watching The Fugitive doing slavery. That's what it felt like, at least for the first 2 acts of the film. And I thought that the decision was really, really smart, because you see the horrors of slavery, but we don't focus on it like in a lot of other films that are made during this time period, right? You see the poor conditions, you're immersed in the period, but the story is not necessarily about the period. It focuses on this one character in a way, and the way the character is framed, that he's kind of a proud man, smart man, strong man, but not a cowering man. And I kept leaning over to Charles as we were watching it. I said, now I understand why Will took this role, because it had been rumored that Quentin Tarantino wanted him for Django Unchained, and it's a very different character that Jamie Foxx has to portray in that film than what Will Smith did in Emancipation. I like the film, man. I know that we had some conversations outside about its potential, whether it's an awards film or not. I think that in a different universe, if the events on Oscar night hadn't happened, I easily could see that Apple would promote this film and you would get Mr. Smith back in the auditorium, all things considered. I don't really think that's going to happen. But I think it's a much better film than a lot of people who don't like this genre of films is giving it credit. And I'll go with Charles next. Charles, what did you think about Emancipation?
I think, first of all, it made me go back and watch Till, because, like you said, there's a certain thing about Black trauma that people celebrate a lot, that these films, because we talked about one-off films. Once you see it, you don't want to see it again. And I was like you. I'm going into this film, I'm thinking it's going to be one of those films I'm really not going to. I mean, it'll be good, but I'm never going to watch this again. But this film actually defies that mold, in that it doesn't get you trapped into the trauma. And because he's such a spiritual man, and this is a spiritual journey, we get wrapped up in what he's doing, how he's surviving. So yeah, the beginning of the film is a lot like I forget the movie that you stated, but the second half of the film is more like Glory, in that it's celebrating the emancipation of these slaves, and I thought the film was really well done. It really hurts me though when we get to, there's this one scene in the film that I really, really, really wish that he had not put into the film, which was when the army gets to the slaves, and it just rubbed me the wrong way. The way it presented itself. I wish he hadn't put that in there. But and to put it up against, I mean, it's a great film. I think it's a really good film. And I really enjoyed the spiritual nature, like I said, of this film. He's a very strong in the faith person who knows God, who believes in God, and God is moving him through this film. And so I give Fuqua credit and kudos for putting that side of the story into the film. So there were parts of the film that I really enjoyed, and one part that I really did not. But I think it was a good film, a pretty good film.
Julian,
that ain't it. That ain't for me. No, I was good things. I liked his use of tracking shots, crane shots, and wide shots. The movement of the camera, and his use of editing, keeping in motion, the fugitive-like structure of the story was cool. Not really a fan of this whole I'm going to wash out my colors to the point where it's almost a black and white movie with a little tinge of color of the people and the surroundings. Not really feeling that at all. I think if he just wanted to go black and white, he's just gone black and white. Also, it's so glossy, it kind of throws me off. Yeah, I think the movie is 20-25 minutes too long. I didn't like the shift from this into whatever was in the last act.
The glory part.
The war film part. Like, okay, you wanted to make a war film. Okay. I do think some of the writing was cheesy, in terms of the lines that they had written. The part that Charles was talking about at the end, it was like, bro, y'all didn't, to me, it was like y'all didn't try. Like y'all wrote that, y'all typed that final draft. That's what y'all doing? All right, okay. There was times where you saw where Will Smith was doing his like, this is what I need to act part. The action movie parts of like fighting alligators and climbing trees and doing all this stuff, I guess was okay. Nah, it didn't work for me. Like I would rather watch Django. Like my biggest thing is that I got to a part of the movie where whenever I heard him talked about Django, and then what happens in the movie took me straight out of it. I was like, bro, but you said this. Like, I don't, like, all right, bet. Like, this film doesn't have enough for me. Story-wise, I've listened to some of his interviews, and he tells these stories about Peter and his faith and how he gets to this point. And I was like, where was that in the movie? Like, I would like to see how he got to that faith. I didn't need to see him get whipped and stuff. I did like the fact that they didn't show you the origin of how he got scarred. It's just like his escape journey. That's cool. But there's ways in which Will is talking about this, and I was like, where was that in the script? The conversations you all had about making this movie, and your conversations about what you put into making this character and portraying it on film is way more interesting to me than what y'all actually put on in the video file that we're going to get to watch on our Apple TVs. Nah, there's some quality filmmaking in there, so I can't say it's a fail, but it's a C for me. Like,
so C for you. All right,
you pass.
Okay, so
you said C? Wow. Yeah. Okay.
What about you, Charles?
I gave it, and to be honest, I hate having to judge this movie up against the last film we saw. We talked about Violent Night, because they're two different movies, and if I give this movie a grade, I gotta.
We went through this last week, man. Just give it a grade, man. And not saying one is better than the other, man. They're different types of movies, man. People are smart enough.
I am.
Well, I'm definitely saying that Violent Night is a much more enjoyable film, and I give it a B. I give it a straight B, maybe. Straight B.
And that's exactly where I was. I was at a B. I mean, I think I went in with expectations. I watched it. I could see the two elements of how they morphed it. I just think, man, for what it is, I would just say this, man, and I understand, and this was a heated conversation that Julian and I were having about the award space and what the award space means. And let's be real honest, Julian. Man, I've seen stuff nominated sometimes on Oscar Day, and I'll pick up the phone and call Charles and go, really? Seriously? I mean, we watch these movies like, so who knows, man? I have no idea what voters think, what they like. I just know one thing, that in a normal year, if the events of this year didn't happen, he'd stand a good shot at getting a nomination for Best Actor this year.
He can still get one.
Huh?
You can still get one.
Well, yeah,
the field is light.
The field is light, but the feelings are still strong. So my point is that, you know, it's going to take a couple of years for him to get past where he is. You think it's just one?
If he gets a nomination, what that says is a lot more people that dislike Chris Rock that care about the actions that Will Smith took. Just say that's my thing. If he gets a nomination, that means there's a lot of people that want to smack the bejeebus out of him a long time ago. And they went and they acted like, oh my God, this is terrible.
Well, I tell you,
white folks, black folks, brown folks, whatever color. If he gets a nomination, Chris Rock know where he is in the world.
Okay, so this is to be continued because we are about to hit award season big time. I know the WAFCO awards are coming up. We're about a month away from CCA and the announcement of the Golden Globes and all of the other critics groups. So to be continued, Julian. We'll see how it shapes up this season, man. So
I know the Black Reel Award nominated.
The Reel Award vote starts next week. So and that's gonna be interesting and telling. So that will tell us something as well early about Will Smith and what people think about emancipation. Are there more people that feel like Julian, or are there voters that feel like me and Charles? So we'll find out pretty soon. But that wraps us up, man. I think we're over by a minute or two. But as we tell you guys in closing every week, please see something good at the movies. We're giving you a couple of options. If you like violent stuff, I need to go and see Violent Night myself because the way they hyping it up, I'm like, all right, I need to check that out. But we'll see you guys on the other side. You guys take care. Enjoy your weekend. And I'll come back with a lot of great LA stories and New York stories next week on the show. You guys take care, man. Peace.
Peace.